Hello, everyone. I'm Dexter Wimberly. Welcome to another open air conversation presented by the Harvey B. Gantt Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm very happy to introduce today's guest. Miguel Torres, professionally known as MIGZ, is a New York City-based artist and educator whose work bridges academic technique and modern conceptualism. Since 2013, he has taught art in the New York City public school system, building on his earlier career as a special education teacher. His practice reflects a belief in art as a transformative tool for self-expression, community connection, and the empowerment of young multilingual learners. Born in North Amityville, New York, Torres holds a BFA in graphic design from SUNY Purchase, an MS in teaching from Long Island University, and a graduate certificate in art history from Lindenwood University. He began exploring portrait and figure art in 1998 while studying life drawing at the Fashion Institute of Technology, later expanding into tattoo artistry in 2012. Rooted in observational art, Torres integrates mindfulness into his creative practice, drawing attention to overlooked details of everyday life. His paintings often incorporate reclaimed wood and lumber cuttings, adding texture, history, and sustainability to his work. His art has been exhibited at MoMA, Lincoln Center, and the Hammer Museum, underscoring his commitment to creating work that is both accessible and profound. Miguel's work is also included in the group exhibition Chop Shop, We Are Here, currently on view at the Harvey B. Gantt Center through October 26, 2025. Without further ado, let's welcome Miguel to today's Open Air. How are you?
Hello. Greetings. I am great. I am great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's always strange hearing someone read your bio, right?
Very strange, but you did a great job at it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. So there's a lot to talk about today, and this is always a really special thing for me when I get to talk to an artist literally for the first time. And so there's so many questions that I have that are actually not questions that I've asked you in the past. So this should be quite fun and natural. Obviously, I just shared a bit of background information about you, but I'd love to just give you a moment to talk about who you are and the work that you do, sort of in your own words.
Sure. Uh, as you said, my name is Miguel Torres. People just call me Migs, my friends and people that are close to me. I've been a New York City school teacher since 2006. I was a special education, special needs teacher for several years. And then in 2013, I transitioned into teaching art. At the same time, while being a full-time teacher, I was also a tattoo artist. So, being a public school teacher, we work about 188 days a year, which is practically like half the year. So all the other free time that I had, I was working as a tattoo artist in shops. Um, and In 2020, I think it was, during the pandemic, um, I made a transition. Several instances happened in my life that made a lot of personal changes, and I joined Chop Shop. And from there, my work took a drastic change from that point.
Talk about being a tattoo artist, which is not something that I know a lot about in terms of like what that means professionally. And I think it's important to kind of talk about it as it relates to your fine art career and how those two things have sort of informed one another, or how being a tattoo artist informed your fine art career. Maybe you can share a bit about that.
Absolutely. So I had been sort of messing around with tattooing since I was like a teenager. I had some cousins that went to Florida and they came back up and they had these like little bootleg tattoos they did with sewing needles. And they showed me how they did it, where they wrapped the tip in thread and they got some over the counter India ink and basically poked dots and did stippling into their skin. And I was kind of fascinated with that from that point. So at some point when I was about 16 or 17, I started doing them on myself. Uh, my mother wasn't too happy about that. Um, but eventually, I moved on up to some machines, and I messed up a couple of people practicing. But fast forward to many, many years later, in about 2012, I went to a tattoo school, which was very unpopular at the time. This was a time during the tattoo industry was transitioning from a very insular community that you had to do apprenticeships, and the school that I went to was like the first of its kind, where they were like giving classes to do this. After that, I started working at shops, and tattoo art in general is commercial art. It's work for hire. It's work that you get paid for. It's not typically what you would consider like a soul searching sort of form of art. And so, and it's on a very difficult surface, a very permanent one where there's no room for error. So it's very high stakes. I learned a lot. Like it actually made me improve my drawing practice. But in tattoos, I would also try to infuse my academic art background. So I got my chops up doing like regular street work style stuff, like a rose here or this and that there. But eventually, I started focusing on portraits, and the majority of my portfolio that I try to promote were portraits that had sort of an academic spin on them, or execution, I should say.
So you mentioned that there was a little bit of resistance in the tattoo community to the idea of there being tattoo schools, and I found that fascinating because I think that to some extent within the art world, there's also some tension between those who do and don't pursue degrees, higher education degrees in the art world, right? So there's a pardon the pun, school of thought that an artist should have an MFA, right? If you're going to be a professional artist pursuing a commercial career, working with galleries, etc. And then there are obviously many examples of artists that don't have an MFA but have gone on to great success. There are probably countless examples that we don't even know of. And so I'm just curious to know, with your own academic journey, um, how do you feel about the relationship between academia and art? I mean, do you see that your education has been really valuable in your journey as a creative individual, or is it just credentials to kind of have people take you more serious?
I'd say in my personal journey, and I was already somebody that I felt very confident and competent about being an artist prior to going to art school. But I kind of uh, I went to two high schools, and the second one that I went to was in a more affluent neighborhood, and they had like a very expansive art department. And so they had a pottery class, they had a photography class, they had an illustration class. It was very detailed. And from that point on, I could honestly say that all of those classes, all the way up into when I went to FIT and I was doing, 6 hour long sessions of life drawing from live models, to when I went to SUNY Purchase and I did more life drawing and still life painting, and all the way till recently when I got my art history certificate. Every last one of those steps has informed my practice. I tried to learn as much as I could from every aspect of it, from every teacher, because these teachers typically were working artists, professionals, lifelong artists that had plenty to contribute, uh, mentoring wise, as well as just technique wise. And so, while I don't think it's a prerequisite for you to be considered a competent artist, I think your passion and your desire to pursue those things is the more determining factor. For me personally, all of it helped, like, a lot.
Yeah, just based upon what you've already shared, I mean, clearly you have like a lifetime of creativity. It's like it's been in you since you were incredibly young, and you've just kind of found different channels and ways to express that. In your artist statement, it speaks about capturing mood rather than representation. Um, can you talk a little bit more about like what that means, especially as it relates to portraiture? Because I think that, and we were talking about this a little like off camera before we got started. There's a certain um, sort of category of artists that are very, very adept at capturing someone's likeness, right? Like that's something where you can find a lot of artists internationally who are very good, you know, drafts people, so they can capture a likeness, but they may not necessarily capture the mood, which is a
Yes,
very different.
yes. It wasn't a conscious thought at first to, like, let me capture the mood. I myself am a very emotional, moody person, I guess you could say. So whenever I would draw a portrait, it would somehow end up infused with like a level of sentimentality or some sort of mood to it. And I noticed it in my work, and other people would notice it as well. Um, at the same time, whenever I would do portraits, and there was a time where I wanted to be one of the people that like would do hyper realism,
Right.
just because like a certain level that comes, a certain level of respect and adoration you get from people when they like, oh my god, look at how real they made this look. But at that point, I've always wrestled with like, okay, if I'm gonna make this hyper realistic portrait, then we have cameras now. The original intention of portrait artists was to capture people in a very what would you call it, flattering pose, or flattering look, like when John Singer Sargent used to do portraits of people, right?
Right.
But now we have cameras. So what's the point of me doing hyper realistic when a camera can do that? What is it that I as an artist can add to this that that a camera can't do? Right? That my hand, my feelings, capturing energy surrounding the subject, that I can infuse into the portrait, that are these sort of intangibles, um, that a camera or a mechanical process cannot do. So the more that I've dove into portraiture, the more I've paid attention to energy. Energy has been
Mm.
something that later in life and most recent years I paid attention to, mostly in dealing with people and places that I go, and the artwork that I create. Energy is all around, and it's something that's ever present that I try to pay attention to.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I think that for people who are not necessarily involved in the art world on either the creative side or the sort of collector administrative side of the art world, there's this tendency to look at someone who's really good at, say, drawing the likeness of a person and thinking, well, because they're really excellent at that, then that just guarantees them success in the art world because they're just blown away by this person's ability to actually capture someone's image almost indiscernible from a photograph, only to find out later that that's a skill that a lot of people have, but you can't necessarily guarantee yourself a career just because you have that skill, right? There's a whole nother layer of the journey of being a professional artist, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about your journey as a professional artist. Like, can you give one or two examples of moments that kind of shifted your artistic career, to kind of gave you the confidence to know, like, I can take this and really take this journey serious?
Um, Sure. I don't know if there was any key moments where it was for me like I can take this journey, because I feel like it was already predestined for me. I hate to sound so cliche about it, but like when I was in kindergarten, they chose one of my drawings for like the cover of the school graduation and that kind of stuff. And I just was always that kid that was like the artist in the neighborhood. But in the process of my career, because I've jumped through many things. I used to treat art like a hustle, so like I did airbrushing for a while, try to make money. I did T-shirts. I was working at a silk screen place where I designed T-shirts to make money. Even the tattoo stuff, as much as I tried to put the artistry and the academic stuff in it, it was all a hustle to in a way to get money as well. Um, but as I've gone through these different stages in my life, the most affirming parts have been when I've tried not to make money from art. So, being a
What
teacher,
do you mean? What do you mean by that?
being a teacher and having my source of income come from somewhere else has given me a certain level of freedom within my art that I don't feel like I have to compromise. I'm not saying anybody else does. I'm just saying for myself, I feel like I don't have to compromise. I can fully experiment and pursue the
Mm.
directions that I want and take risks without it depending on whether or not I'm going to eat, or what my income is going to be for the year. So I feel like being able to have done that freed me up, and that kind of gave me the confidence to pursue these other sort of directions of art that are more personal. Being as shallow as this might sound, being on social media and getting compliments and feedback from other artists that I respect was very, filling for me. It was just like, oh my god, this guy, liked my picture, and so I fell into a bit of that as well. But it's reaffirming when people that you respect show that they respect your work as well. Um, Being invited to the group that I'm a part of, Chop Shop, was also very reaffirming, because there's wonderful artists in that group as well.
Well, that's very interesting to hear, because I think that the way we interact with art because of social media has changed so drastically in the past 15 years. And I often wonder, because I'm not an artist myself, but even as a curator, I sometimes experience this. Often wonder whether or not for an artist, it's a net positive or overwhelming to have so many other people's images in your face all the time. I sometimes feel overwhelmed, just to be honest, by just overwhelmed by it all. Like, and that's not even me, like, sort of showing my age, quote unquote, because there have been times when I was, much younger, that I also felt overwhelmed by it all, just because sometimes things just get out of hand. But for you as an artist, how do you balance that relationship with social media and seeing other people's art, so much of other people's art?
Um, it was social media was a tool. And I grew up in an era where, like, during high school, America Online came out and there was chat groups, and I'm like the generation that transitioned from no internet to internet, and then like social media and the monster that that's become. So I do have a reference point of what it was like before that. But getting bombarded with images, and I was just talking to a friend about this the other day. I look at this very skeptically. I'm like a very like what do you call it, skeptical of like the system and all these other things. Where I heard that people that used to work casinos, that would design the machines and design them in a way to keep people fixed on the machine and keep playing, then transitioned and started working for social media companies. And so, literally, I don't just look at the images as images and get bombarded with artwork. I'm also looking at this as like, this is trying to program me, and this is trying to keep me swiping and stay on the app for longer. So, I come into the space with a healthy amount of skepticism. I'm also somebody that practices meditation and mindfulness. And when I am on social media too much, I can literally feel it. Like I can feel the tension and the energy in my body change. And so I have to sort of disconnect, reset, get connected with the natural world again, go hiking, go grounding, go hug a tree, go walk barefoot through the grass, the whole business, just to reset everything.
You mentioned meditation and mindfulness. If it's not too personal, can you talk a little bit more about that and what made you incorporate that into your life? Was it a conscious decision? Was it something you always did? Where did that come from?
So I think this might be something that maybe a lot of artists experience, and I wasn't aware of it until much later in life. But I'm a highly sensitive person. My uh, receiver is turned all the way up. Noises are really high for me. Lights are bright for me. If somebody goes like this on my skin, I feel it, and like it drives me crazy. And unbeknownst to me, that caused me to not how to handle certain environments where I'm overstimulated. And because of that, and trying to manage and be normal and just go along with the crowd and do things that everybody else is doing, I was causing myself a lot of emotional pain.
Mm.
I didn't know how to manage these feelings. I didn't know how to manage getting along with other people with all the sensitivities that I had. And at some point, I started going to therapy for these things. And I had seen multiple therapists. And then I had one particular one that he introduced me into mindfulness meditation, breathing meditation, specifically like the Tibetan form, where you focus on breathing. He recommended a book called Turning Your Mind into an Ally. I went further into it. I read The Power of Now, Full Catastrophe Living by John Kabat-Zinn, where they did clinics with people that were suffering from terminal illness, and they were doing the meditation clinics and measuring how much relief the people got from doing meditation. And it's something that I kept as a practice very heavily for quite some time. And then, I fall off here and there, and I try to remind myself to get back to it. But now, because I have the understandings of it, I can kind of apply it at any time. And it was a complete world changer for me. Um, and I highly recommend it to anybody who hasn't tried it.
That's great. And there's so much about what you've said so far in our conversation that kind of brings me back to one word that kind of keeps coming into my mind, and that word is balance. The thing about balance that I find important and, pardon the cliche, fascinating, um, is that if you can find balance in your creative life, you can be a lot happier than if you're just simply pursue. For example, you mentioned having income other than income that's just from your art. So that gives you, personally, you, the freedom to not necessarily think about how the thing you're working on is going to be sold every time you're doing it and how you're going to make money from that every single time you're doing it. And then that opens up different pathways in your mind of how to approach your piece, because you're, in a way, you're doing it for yourself, right? Like it's just an expression of how you want to bring something into the world. And you found a way to have that balance, and then also dealing with the stimulation that you mentioned and all being overstimulated, and finding mindfulness and meditation as a way to also find balance. And I just, I'm not a therapist, and certainly I'm still seeking balance in many ways in my own life. But it is something that I'm very conscious of, like the need for balance. So whenever things feel off balance, I can tell like immediately, right? And so I bring this up because in the past few weeks, and this is just me, just kind of sharing something personal with you.
Sure.
In the past few weeks, a few people that I haven't talked to in years, that I still consider to be friends. You know how life is. Life just, life goes on, and especially in the past 5 years, like we all kind of missed the step with the pandemic, and
Yeah,
like some
for
people you
sure.
got it in very very close communication with, and for some people you're like, wow, we haven't talked in 6 years. How did that happen, right? Um, and so a couple of people that I haven't talked to in years, reached out to me out of the blue, and one of them is dealing with some, serious like financial issues. Um, and they're a creative person, and the other one, and they don't know each other. The other one is dealing with some serious health issues, and they're a creative person. And it's just like, wow, you never know what's going on in other people's lives. You just
Yeah,
kind of
for
like,
sure.
sometimes we have like our blinders on and we're just doing our thing, our thing, our thing. And then like you hear from someone and you're like, whoa, I had no idea that that person was suffering in that way, you know? And a
Sure.
lot of that suffering is connected to imbalance, right? And so for you as a creative person, and I bring this up because I've spent a lot of time over the past decade working one-on-one with artists, and then eventually in a larger way with artists about the financial aspect of being an artist, right? So there's the creative side and then there's the business sort of financial side, right? And those two things need balance. And if you don't have balance in those things, you'll find yourself making great work but you can't pay your rent,
Right.
right? Or you're doing all of these wonderful things, but your health is suffering because you're not taking care of yourself. You're kind of like just doing all of this business stuff, but you're not maybe going to the doctor frequent enough. You're not exercising enough. You're not looking at what you're eating. And there are some things that are obviously outside of your one's control. But that
Sure.
long rambling, I'm sorry for my like long rambling statement
Oh,
there,
thank you for that.
but really that's one of the things that keeps coming into my mind as I'm talking to you. I don't know you very well, we're sort of getting to know each other now, but I get a sense that you're someone who has probably gone through enough in your life to recognize like where you need balance. And it's great to hear you express that, because a lot of people just they just kind of keep plowing through it, off balance, off balance, off balance. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, I've learned the hard way to make sure that I have balance.
Me too.
If you Yeah, you don't take care of things, they manifest themselves in multiple ways. Maybe it strains the relationships you have with people, maybe it's your health, who knows what. So I think people taking care of themselves, artists and non-artists, like that's primary, right? Like you have to be here, you got to be alive, you got to be healthy. I've had quite a few personal things that happened that as we go through the artwork, I'll talk about, but where I was in the mode when I was doing tattoos and doing portraits for pay, I was grinding, plow ahead, just putting in the hours. And if I do a tattoo, I do a 13-hour session sitting in the chair
Wow.
without getting it. And, then I'd walk like Igor the next day, hobbling around and just do it all over again for like a week straight. And, you know, then when I split with my kid's mother and when I had an incident with my mother where she disappeared, these things knocked me on my behind, and it made me really reevaluate my life and what's important. And with the little bit of time that I have with all the responsibilities I'm juggling, I had to really look at art as what role does it play in my life and where my source of happiness comes from and my source of joy. And I've from that transition point from what I used to do before till now, art plays a different role for me. It always had the potential to do that before, but I guess I wasn't treating it with the amount of respect that I should have, and now has a much deeper role in my life.
Can you talk a little bit about being a teacher and teaching young people, which I find to be like one of the most like fascinating and challenging career choices, because you know whenever I'm around even my own children long enough, I'm like, wow, the energy in here is crazy.
Yeah,
um, and so
for
so
sure.
h- like what drew you to that? Can you talk a little bit about like how that impacts your life as a creative person, being a teacher?
Yes, absolutely. That's another one of these things that just like I kind of was doing early on. Um, when I was working, I'm sorry, when I was attending SUNY Purchase, and I was working on campus at the daycare center they had there, and so I'd work with babies like 1 and 2 years old, and go in there, you
Wow.
play with them, give them attention, and then I got to go to class.
Wow.
Um, Years later, I was working at Echo Unlimited, the urban clothing brand. And part time, when I would leave that job, I worked at Queensbridge Daycare Center. and I was a gym teacher there, and I do activities for little kids. And then
Wow.
I got laid off from Echo because they downsized the whole company, and I transitioned into a full time daycare person at the time. And I worked with universal pre-K with 4 year olds. I work with 2.5 year olds. And yes, it's a lot of energy, a lot of craziness. But at that point, I had experienced what it was like to like work at a creative company, being a creative, dealing with that style of life, and I wanted something a little more stable so I could raise a family. Plus, I also just I like working with kids. They were awesome. And so I got into the New York City Teaching Fellows program, and they paid for my master's degree, and they got me in, right after a summer. It was only a couple of months, and I was standing there in front of a class of like 30 kids, and, not knowing what to do. Um, with all that, when I teach, especially the young kids, right now I teach K through 5, and it's a lot of psychology involved. And I'm trying to find the right way to describe this, but I try to find a way where the kids coming in don't view art as a thing it's based on skill, right? I try
Right.
to dispel that immediately. I want them, whether they choose to be an artist, whether they think they can draw or they can't draw, I want them to find joy in some way that this can serve them. And so I always hammer into them like this is not about how well you draw. This is about you taking control of the materials, experimenting, having fun with it, right? Making a mess, whatever it happens to be. But this doesn't have to be another source of stress. They already got a whole day of dealing with math and reading and writing and everything else. This is the time where you can kind of release that energy and you can actually just enjoy yourself. And so in doing that, with students over this will be my 19th year teaching in the
Wow.
public schools. Um, that feeds in my practice as well. It's like, okay, this is not about skill. Plays a role, right? Like I have some outstanding students that are like they want to pursue that. That's great. That's wonderful. And for myself too, like I hold myself to a certain standard of skill, but this still has to stay as a place of play and joy and be a part of my life without adding stress to it.
Wow. Wow. Well, I think this is a good moment for us to look at some images of your work and talk through them. So I'll have the production magicians start the slideshow.
Yeah.
And so I think we have a handful of early images that we can go through. We don't have to speed too quickly. I'd love for you to just take a moment and share a little bit about each image that's on screen. So let's start here.
So where I kind of I guess got known for my artwork via social media was doing portraits of hip hop artists at the same time that I was doing tattoos. I largely got I guess like a niche drawing style where I was using white charcoal, which is basically chalk, on black backgrounds. And so I my idea was that I would do highly academic rendering of hip hop artists because it wasn't something I had seen up to that point. I'd seen illustrations of hip hop artists before, but I never seen like an academic approach to it. Um, this piece in particular, I also like collaging, but believe it or not, that brown background was actually a leftover piece of paper from my students' work. They were doing like a ink roller, like with brayers and just doing printmaking, and this was like the paper to protect the table from getting messy. And I took the paper and I collaged on top of it and did the drawing of Biggie.
Fantastic. Um, so same thing. If we can advance to the next image and let's kind of do the same thing. Just give a little bit of background.
So within the tattooing as well as the drawing on paper and doing this sort of black and white style, I always had in the back of my head it was reminiscent of like these old movie posters that were illustrated where you had like a montage of images. Um, and I kind of thought that showing multiple faces and multiple aspects of a person like kind of revealed more of who they are, not just one singular image. So a lot of times I would do just sort of these montages, and you'll see that theme through my early stuff. We can go ahead from here.
Before
Oh, I'm
before
sorry.
we advance, Yeah, before we advance to the next image, I want to talk a little bit more about, like, like your life as a tattoo artist, because I'm sure it's one of the most like nerve-wracking like occupations, because you're dealing with people who have a very, in their mind, like they have an idea of what they want, but then at the same time I'm sure they're also asking you your opinion, and then someone's asking you your opinion about something that's going to be on their on their body forever. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's challenging. It's very different than obviously creating my own artwork because, when I create my own art, it's just me. I don't answer to anybody else. There is nothing to be held. I only hold myself accountable to me. Being a tattoo artist was super stressful. But at the same time, I would go into a flow state. So after a certain point, once all those decisions are made, just like the actual technical applying of the tattoo becomes just sort of like this meditative thing. But dealing with people was always the largest part of being a tattoo artist, right? Like the art is secondary to having interpersonal communication skills because you have a variety of people. You got somebody that comes in and is like, I want a whole sleeve. Great. What do you want? I don't know. Can you tell me what I want? And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Then you got other people where it's like, my mother passed away 10 years ago and I want to do a memorial portrait. Then you got somebody else that's like, I want to be tatted up, you know what I'm saying? So I can be on Instagram. And I'm like, you're dealing with every variety of personality that comes through, and you have to learn how to adjust and be professional with each one. And that wasn't always so easy for me. Like I explained to you, I was highly sensitive, I get grumpy and whatever else, and I had to push through that to provide service for people.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Powerful. Let's advance to the next.
So this is just more examples of sort of like that montage style, but this pretty much right here is what I mostly got known for previously, before making my transition into painting. This is Immortal Technique. I don't know if you're familiar with him, hip hop artist. And here was a montage of different images that I sourced, and this is white charcoal on black paper. So a lot of people used to like this because it was drawing in reverse. Rather than drawing the shadows and the outlines, I was actually drawing sort of the highlights and lights in the image, which was fun for me to do as well.
Let's advance to the next image, and I have a question afterwards. So obviously, this is Rakim. Anyone who claims to be a hip hop fan who doesn't know that before I said it needs to go back and decide whether or not they're actually a hip hop fan.
For sure.
um,
100%, yeah.
so, um, so obviously, you are reproducing the likeness of very well known individuals, and I know some challenges come with that. And can you talk a little bit about the professional challenges one might face in this in making this kind of work?
Sure. So first I want to say his he reached out via his daughter. His daughter reached out to me on Instagram after I posted this, and he was like, "Hey, my dad wanted to let you know that he appreciates what you did." And I was, for me, that was like, Rakim sent a message to his daughter to me because, like, I grew up in hip hop. I grew up on the same street as one of the guys from De La Soul, Dave. Rest in peace. So this was like a prominent figure in my upbringing, Rakim. But um, there was multiple challenges in doing these portraits because they're derivative. So the majority, I'm sourcing these images from things I found on the internet or old hip hop magazines that I got. Uh, Most of the people, when I've posted them and I tagged them on and everything else, they really appreciate it and they shared their appreciation. Some people offered like, "Hey, I want to do a T-shirt. I want to use your image for a T-shirt. What's your price? What's your fee?" Um, but there was times where I had like an artist shop. I don't know if you're familiar with these websites where you could just like put up an image and you could apply it across like products like a cup
Sure,
or a
sure.
T-shirt. I did that, and I was making pennies a month on that. That wasn't like a big income maker. Um, but some people had reached out and had an issue with me doing that, and some of those conversations got a bit uncomfortable. And that was one of the things that pushed me towards like, hey, if I'm going to keep on running into issues, with using other people's likenesses, which they are well entitled to be protective because this is how they make their money, their image, and everything else. I understand that. Then I need to start sourcing my images in other ways. Maybe, taking my own photography, or if I manage to meet up with one of these guys, taking an actual picture of them myself. But even still, that's their likeness, and that's still something I'm going to have to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in this day and age, I think the perception from people on the outside is that the moment they see someone commercializing their image, there's this idea that they're making tons of money, and they're like, laughing all the way to the bank, when in many cases it's just an homage and respect for the person that's being expressed through, these activities. But you're right. I mean, it can get really tricky, and probably now more so than ever because of what we talked about earlier with social media. I mean, 20
Absolutely.
years ago 20 years ago, there were already artists, who were reproducing images of famous people, of course, but there was no mechanism for those famous people to see those images right away, right? So
Sure.
then it's a whole different dynamic. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. Let's advance to the next image.
So this was a mural I did at a local elementary school in Brooklyn. This is in East New York in Starrett City, or close to Starrett City, close to Pennsylvania Avenue. I happened to know the principal, and she was looking for somebody to do a mural. She wanted to give the school some color because the architecture and sort of like the generic paint that they had was not something that was really enticing to the kids. So again, this was just another avenue for me to pursue portraiture. But this was different because I was still doing this. I did this mural during the time I was still doing the black and white portraits. So this was one of the few opportunities I had to actually paint and do color.
Hmm.
And this was actually done with house paints that I mixed. This wasn't like graffiti style aerosol cans. This was hand painted by brush. Took me about 2 weeks. I gridded out everything. I think that wall was like, I don't know if it was 18 by 8 or 20. I can't recall the actual dimensions, but one of the cool parts was as I was working on this. This was during the summer, uh, 90-degree heat. I'm sweating, but it had a summer program there, and the kids would walk by every day, and they're like, "Oh my god, oh how cool!" And they got to see it in process. And people from the community came out. They're like, "Oh man, this is awesome! This is cool! Like, what are you doing on the wall and everything?" Everything. It was really sweet to see people's reaction as I was painting it and working on it. And then when I finally, took away the protective barrier and it was finally unveiled, people were really happy in the neighborhood with it. So it was a sweet experience.
Yeah, art has that power. I mean, and it's a power that we can often take for granted, that people can have profound emotional experiences seeing someone's creativity in that way. And you can forget that easily just because of being inundated, again, as we talked about earlier, inundated with images. And then you're there, you make this mural and someone walks by and you like brighten their day, as like corny as that might sound, like, but you actually like literally brighten their day and give them a smile, and give them, maybe something to even talk about to the next person they run into, like, hey, you should go check that out. It shifts it shifts people's relationship with their environment in a way that is profound.
Absolutely.
And it's meaningful for younger and older people. Let's advance to the next image, and I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I love talking to you, and I'm realizing that we got about 20 minutes. So let's
Sure.
hit it. Okay.
Okay, we can
So,
kind of go through these. This is just another montage portrait tattoo that I did of Nikola Tesla.
mhm,
Still the same
mhm.
kind of style that I had been working in the drawings and the tattoos.
Interesting subject. I'm sure that, I mean, we don't have time for it, but I would love the backstory of someone who wants
Sure.
a Nikola Tesla
Absolutely.
Tesla tattoo. Not the common subject. Not a
No, not.
common subject.
I was excited to do it. I'll tell you that much.
Let's go to the next image. So
So
now we're into your fine art work. Okay.
So this was still done during that time where I was doing that style of work, but a gentleman by the name of Ron Finley Jr. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He goes by the Gangster Gardener, and he's out in LA. and he has a very cool TED talk. You guys should check it out. But he
Hmm.
promotes gardening in urban neighborhoods. He actually got the city to change the law where people are now allowed to garden on I forgot what they call it, but it's like this patch of grass that's on the side of the sidewalk. He did that and he actually got in trouble for it, but then fighting the city for it, he got the law changed. And so now people in that area can actually do community gardening in those spaces. He has a nonprofit, and they were partnered up with Fiskars. They make the scissors and the shovels. And what he would do is he would send the shovels out to different artists. And I think the original intention was to then auction off the shovels after as they got them back to raise money for his nonprofit. And I had seen his TED talk. I had read some articles about him. I did some homework on him, and I got completely inspired because I'm a nature kid and like I do gardening and stuff too. And so I said we connected via social media, I think it was. Excuse me. And he asked me if I'd be up for doing a shovel. I was completely up for it. Again, I did a portrait, my typical style, a little bit of montage because I put bees on the side and I put the sunset up at the top. And I sent it back to him, and he was very excited about the results. He held on to the shovel as well as many others that were done for the project. It's called Urban Weaponry, Weapons of Mass Creation. And in September, as part of a Breathe at the Hammer Museum in LA, where they focus on like artists that work in sustainability in that as a theme. They took pieces of his actual garden and brought it into the museum, and they had a whole space that was things from his garden. And then separately, they had a display of all the shovels that the people worked on. And I was invited to the opening, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I got to meet him in person, and he was very gracious. He was a wonderful person to meet.
That's great. That's great. Let's advance to the next image, and I think it might be okay. Great. This a work in Chop Shop?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So in Chop Shop, I came to Chop Shop. I can't recall the exact year, but it was during the pandemic. Uh, Shout out to Steve. Steve organized the whole thing as well as Roy, and we got together as a group of artists just to show support, talk to each other, you know, and make connection during the pandemic when you know everybody was forced to be inside and you know avoiding people. Um, as I had said earlier, I was going through some personal things, and I had split with the mother of my children, and I was depressed, and you know, I was going through things, and I was suddenly having to juggle different responsibilities and organize my life in a way that I hadn't before. And so one night, one night I can't recall what was the trigger for it, but it just like all came hitting me at once where I came up with this idea of doing something where there's different blocks and people can interact with them and reorganize them to be in different narratives. And originally the intention was to have different images, sometimes unrelated images on different blocks, and allow people to reorganize them and use them as a mechanism to start talking and just create their own narrative and bring their own experiences and interpretation to what it is. But I was getting frustrated because, again, with sourcing images and photography, I'm kind of a hermit. And so I'm not around a lot of people all the time, except at school. But, you know, I can't take pictures of the kids and stuff.
Right.
Um,
Sure.
so I propped up a mirror right next to my easel, and this one was done from life. I set up the you know the blocks and everything, and I just started painting an image of myself. I think a bit of the stress and everything else I was experiencing was captured into the image, um, but I did it in a way where it wouldn't even be able to be like unified, so to speak. Like I didn't just draw myself directly. I took one block and zoomed in on my eye. And I took another block and I zoomed in on the other eye. And I did these sort of
Yeah.
small zoom ins of different sections of my face, um, which goes into the mindfulness part, especially with observational art that I've experienced in doing still lifes and portraits from life, is that you get fully engaged in the process. And in doing that, I notice subtleties in color, and vibe and everything else that I don't normally pick up from just a photograph. So we should
Right.
move on. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
let's advance it to the next. No, no, they're very, very, very helpful. I just wanted to give you space to share that.
Sure.
Um, please proceed.
So here was the process, but you can see what I call the different iterations where the image can be organized in different ways. And through Chop Shop and conversations at Chop Shop, what started to come out as a theme is that disorganizing the face and the image, you start to have to reckon with what you're looking at. You don't no longer have a single reference point. You have like, what is this? Is it a block with paint on it? Is it an ear? Is it a fragment of texture? And so the whole psychology behind it forces you to dispel what the overall image is and try to get into these small cross sections and subsections of things. And this also kind of mirrors the way I see. Like when I meet a person, I'm looking at this is like sort of my perspective in the way I capture information. So this one is a portrait of my mother that I did. My mother, while I was still pursuing tattooing and everything else, and I was in Chop Shop, she disappeared one day. I got a call at like 2 o'clock in the morning from the police that she was missing. A missing persons report was filed for her. We found her the next day. She was about 40 miles away from home. And long
Wow.
story short, it turned out she had a large brain tumor, like a massive brain tumor, and that caused her to sort of like be disoriented and just drive for hours. And so that began a long 2 to 3 years where I had to be by her side and getting everything done to get her to get her surgeries and take her back and forth to the hospital and move her out of her house into my home and everything else. And so the thematically for this image, this was post surgery and still during her recovery, still the same approach of doing the fragmentations, but in a conversation in Chop Shop, it was actually another brother, Ja. He was talking to brother Beresford, and they were talking about some fragments of glass that he had in his work. They brought up the concept of, I believe it's called, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, kintsugi. And that is when you have pottery or cups that are broken, and then they mend it with gold compound, and that's supposed to accentuate the beauty and make it even more beautiful because now it has a lived experience. So I took that concept and did the gold leaf with those pieces in this image.
Great work. Great work. Let's advance to the next image. I
Sure.
guess is more details of that work.
Yeah, so these are the different iterations. And again, brother Ema, another member of Chop, he was also sort of cheering me on with some of the iterations. Like the further away it got from the context of being a person's face, the more he was like, "Yes, yes, go in that direction." And I appreciated that because it helped me sort of understand the psychology of what was going on, even though it wasn't apparent to me at the moment. This one was a little more of experimentation, still using the fragmentation, but this is a gentleman that worked at a halal cart down the street from me, and
Mm.
he's from Bangladesh, and his name was Ayub. And we just were having a friendly conversation while I was ordering my food and stuff. And the guy was just like so super cool that I asked him if it was okay if I painted a picture of him. And you would have thought that I gave him a winning lotto ticket. He was like, "What, me? Like me?" And he started straightening up and everything. And it was a real sweet thing. So I took a picture of him and I did this execution. But this was also during a time where I was thinking about like Jasper Johns, and they used to say how his pieces were like organizations of different objects. It was like a mini gallery within the actual image. So that's why you'll see like objects like the fork, and that might come into play in some later pieces and stuff. But I also wanted to celebrate uh, folks that immigrate to this country looking for a better life, that do jobs that a lot of people here won't do, um, especially with the narrative that's going on now. I wanted to do something that honors their contribution to the fabric of the city and this country. So I thought by doing this portrait, that was contributing to that.
Wonderful work. Do we? I think we have some details of this piece moving forward.
Yeah, the other
Oh, it's a new
these
piece.
last
Okay.
don't have iterations. These two are just standalone images. This one was shown in MoMA. They had a teacher show where they offered the New York City teachers to have a section in the education wing, and they had a show organized by curator David Rios. Shout out to him, as well as Jackie Cruz. And this one, again, we're dealing with the blocks and fragmentation and montage, but instead of working with a singular image, this was more working with sorting through my father's side of the family where most of my indigenous roots comes from. I went on ancestry.com and got documentation where, my great grandfather on his, I forgot what the form was, but it said Indio, and they were still organizing people based on that in Puerto Rico. And in this image, there's a picture of my father as a child with his sister, my grandfather fishing, and my great grandfather there as well. The eyes that you see zoomed in. So it's multi layers of sort of like retracing my roots on my father's side.
Wonderful. Yeah. What was that experience like seeing your work in the Museum of Modern Art?
Oh man, uh, that was one of the greatest feelings for multiple reasons. Of course, it's like, oh, I got something in the moment. Yeah, I don't care. Like, it's a teacher show, so it's not like, oh, I got through to the MoMA like through the regular channels. But as Brother Steve said, it's either an L or a W, and that was definitely a W. Um, and But my father flew up from Puerto Rico, and he came and he got to see this piece, and he has a complicated history with his father's side of the family and everything,
Yeah.
but he got to see this piece in person and connect with it personally while I was there with him. My children got to go to the MoMA and see that their dad has a piece in the MoMA. My mother, who went through her whole ordeal and was recovering, got to go to the museum and see that her son has a piece up there. So those pieces that I was able to bring in the people that I care about the most, and they got to experience it and have that feeling that they had some piece of this, was more important than anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. Um, yeah, I'm sure it was like really fantastic experience for them as well. Yeah. Yeah. Let's advance to the next image. I'm keeping an eye on time. I think we're down to our final few minutes. So,
I
um,
believe it's the last one.
is it okay? That's good. That's good. So I can get in a few more questions.
Sure, absolutely.
So what are you working on now? Like what's in the works, and what are you looking forward to?
So I'm still working within this particular project with the blocks. Originally, it was called context blocks, but I thought that was like too hokey. So I changed the title to alternate sides as a ode to New York City streets, where every couple of days you got to move your cars; they can't stay stagnant. Um, and I think that that speaks to the impermanence of the pieces. I would like to invite people, not just myself, to sort of organize and do snapshots of the images and then write their narrative. So there's a writing component and also a participation component. Um, I'm creating other pieces, and within that language of using the blocks, there's multiple directions I can go. As you saw, there's one where there's multiple images and montage, or there's the singular image, and then that deals with the psychology of disassociating and taking away the label and just confronting what's in front of you and really reckoning with what those pieces are. So I'm still exploring and experimenting within that language of the blocks. It's still pretty early on in the process. So that's really what my focus is right now. I'm taking pictures of people I'm close to, people I have moments with, and holding those so that I have my own reference material to do these paintings for as well.
That's great. That's great. Are there anything any subjects rather that we haven't touched on? Is there anything you like to say as we conclude today's conversation? I don't want it to
Sure.
just be an abrupt ending, so
No,
I just would love to
sure,
offer
absolutely.
space.
I did write a small guide that's on Amazon, and it was using your art as a method of meditation. So, art as meditation is the title of it. It's not like a full-on book, but when I used to go to Buddhist temples, like there's one up in Carmel, New York, uh, they have all these like very small pamphlets and sort of prayer books and stuff and I kind of designed it in that fashion. And it really is just like a step-by-step guide of how to use your artistic practice as a form of meditation. So in most forms of meditation, there's a focal point, whether it's beads and you're counting the beads or praying along with beads, or it's your breath, or it's a mantra. So in this book, or this guide, I should say, I talk about how using your artwork as the focal point and using that to be mindful and in the present moment. It's done so much for me in my life, that I hope it helps somebody else out there.
Well, I couldn't think of a better note to end on. I really appreciate your openness today, your vulnerability, and the care you've put into answering my questions. I know there were a lot of questions.
Thank you so much.
uh,
Thank you so much for this.
and I will have an opportunity to see your work at the Gantt Center because I'll be there in a few weeks. So congratulations on being in that show, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be reading my last words right now, final words for today's conversation. But thank you again, Miguel. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
The Gantt Center's goal, as always, is to provide programs that inform and inspire. The support of viewers like you allows the Gantt Center to expand its reach and further develop programs like today's Open Air. You can lend your support to the Gantt Center by visiting ganttcenter.org/donate. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for future programs and other video content updates. I want to thank you for joining us for another great open air conversation, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a wonderful and safe evening. Good night.